Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our Synod Zoom-in. My name is Lucienne Hensel. I am Zooming in from Wellington, and I will be your facilitator this evening. We have people joining us tonight from all around the country and even someone from Australia. Thank you for joining us. Now my haere mai. Some housekeeping notices to start with. So please note that the session in whole or in part may be recorded and shared with those people who could not attend but were interested. And screenshots may be taken for promotional purposes. If you want more information or you want to share your privacy and sharing preferences, please get in touch with the Secretariat at nzcbc.org.nz. Please keep conduct respectful in order that we can all enjoy the session. The chat function allows you to chat with the organizers and the panelists. Please use this if you have any technical issues or if you have any questions during the Q&A. You're actually welcome to send questions in at any time during the presentation, but the Q&A itself will be after all panelists have spoken. Some of you have already sent in some questions. Thank you. And these have been forwarded to the panelists for consideration. Microphones for attendees have been turned off to ensure everyone can hear well. And non-speaking attendees, please stay muted with video off to allow the best possible experience for those listening and viewing. Let's just pause for a moment and remember that we are in the presence of our loving God, even in this cyberspace. Let's just pause from the busyness of this day and take a moment. And I invite you now to pray this prayer with me in whichever way you feel comfortable. God of each breath, God of this next breath, may this moment we're in be a moment now filled with reassurance and grace, with kindness and patience for ourselves and for others. May it be marked by hope and compassion, by learning and unlearning. May it be a moment unencumbered by mistakes we've made or results we fear. May it be a moment of peace and renewal, a breath of new life. Amen. Now, in the last 4 years, a word that we heard again and again was unprecedented. We heard it in relation to the COVID pandemic, the way world leaders reacted and things they put in place. We heard it about the extreme climate change, weather patterns, and so on. But even in our church, in the last few years, something unprecedented has been happening, brought about by the Synod on Synodality, which continues to unfold. As we know, it started with consultations in Catholic parishes around the world. The voices of all the baptized contributing first to diocesan, then to national, then continental, and finally to the universal submissions to be discerned through prayerful listening, not only by bishops this time, but also by priests and lay people, including women. So tonight is an opportunity for us to hear from our New Zealand delegates about their experience of this first General Assembly of the Synod last October. And it is my pleasure to introduce tonight Fr Dennis Nacorda, a priest of the Wellington Archdiocese, Manuel Beazley, Auckland Vicar for Maori, and Archbishop Paul Martin, Archbishop of Wellington. Welcome and thank you for making the time to be with us this evening. We would love to hear about your experience of participating in this Synod Assembly in Rome. I'm aware that for all three of you, it was the first Synod, but there would have been some surprises perhaps that you did not expect, some things you may have found challenging, and we'd love to hear about that. We also know that Pope Francis is calling us to become a more synodal church. What did you learn about synodality through this experience of being at the Synod? And what insights might you have gained into the way forward for us here in the New Zealand Church? And a question that came in earlier asked, in what way did your experience of the Synod in Rome change or affect you? So I invite Fr Dennis to start.
Hello, can you hear me? Oh, can you hear me?
Yes,
sounds
we
good.
can hear you.
Okay. All right. I'm not sure where to start, but my overall view of the whole synod is that there'll be no other way into the future but the synodal way. That's how I consider. That's how I look at it. The whole thing. It's really, for me, it's full of hope, so to say. And on personal level, going to Rome was my first time, and the culture itself is a shock to me. Having eating pasta almost every day, it's like, oh, can there be any other dish except for pasta? Pasta for lunch, dinner, and breakfast. Just joking, but really, the whole synod is quite an experience for me. It's an eye opener for me of how the church should work, and I also able to experience a lot of people from all over the world and learn from their own experiences in their side of the world. And yes, I gain insights and things that I could actually take in for New Zealand, for my parish particularly. And one of the things that amazed me is Pope Francis kept on popping in in some sessions to listen to our conversations, to our interventions and our reports. And there was one time that he spoke about that he really intervened, so to say, and he spoke about evangelical poverty. He was passionate about that, and he tried to explain to us what does it mean for the church to be to have that to be an evangelical, what it is meant to be to look at evangelical poverty for the church. And I was living with many African bishops, and the dress code, they really follow the dress code. And because it's my first time to go to Rome, I didn't know that you have to wear all the time the formal dress. I thought that it's just an ordinary, I mean, you can wear our own thing, but it's not really. You have to wear collar all the time. So next time I'll be ready. I'll be prepared. And one thing that struck me in there is that everything that's put in are entertained. Like even those that are in the left side of the spectrum and the right side of the spectrum, they're all put into the table and being heard and listened to with respect and reverence to what they're saying, speaking about. And that's really good. And that gave us a kind of insight as to how the church is situated at this time. And yeah, at the first time, it was challenging for me to participate because it's the Synod of Bishops, and there were many bishops indeed. But there were quite a few young people in there as well that joined in the Synod, and that's where I kind of have that opportunity to socialize with. We were housed in different place because I think because they consider us young, they put us somewhere farther. But that was a good thing because we're able to bond together with the young people and learn from each other at the same time. Yeah. With regards to the synod process, the discernment of the spirits is really good. I I I believe that this is quite a good tool for parish organizations to help us discern more about what we need to do in our parish level, and also the result of the synod, the synthesis. I truly uphold that. That's really helpful for even in a parish setting, with the young people, with the parish council, the finance and everything, all directed towards mission. And that's what I'm hoping to be able to do here in my own parish here in Wairarapa. Is that long enough?
Unless you have something else to share.
Okay. Um, yeah, that's all I think I can think of at the moment.
Thank you.
A bit, yeah.
Thank you, Dennis. Over to you, Manuel.
Ai, te hunga whakapono tēnā koutou katoa, koutou e noho mai tawhiti, e noho mai tata, tēnei ake te mihi ki a koutou, ko huhui mai tātou e i tēnei ahiahi no reira, me pēnei ake te kōrero ki a koutou, piki mai, kake mai, nau mai, hara mai ki tēnei wahanga, tēnei hōtaka, e haka pāho atu mātou, hiaha wā tātou nei whakaro, tātou nei kihi o tātou nei mahi, pāna ki tēnei mea te hinota. So, good evening, everyone. My name is Manuel Beazley. I'm the Vicar for Maori for the Diocese of Auckland. And welcome as we've come together tonight to share this time where Archbishop Paul Dennis and myself can just share of our experiences of the Synod. My experience of the Synod really goes back to the parish and the diocesan phase of the process, and I was involved there, both in our local parish community, but also in the diocesan activities that were held in the Auckland diocese, and then leading to the national hui. I wasn't a participant of the continental hui, and so I was sort of surprised when I was asked if I would consider putting my name forward to be selected for one of the delegates, one of the members for the assembly in Rome. And so I did, and I sent my CV away. And a few weeks later, I got an email from Cardinal Grech, who is the president, if you like, of the Synod, or the Secretary General, rather, of the Synod, informing me that the Holy Father had chosen me as one of the representatives, one of the members, the voting members of the Assembly. So that was quite a humbling experience, just having that appointment made. But then I had to keep it secret for a few weeks until they had made the final announcement. And when that came, I was overwhelmed with the congratulatory messages, but also messages from people saying, look, you must stand up for this and must stand up for that and this, that, and every other thing. So that process was quite interesting as well. My experience of the Synod, they keep saying that the Synod is about walking together, and we did a lot of walking together, but most of it was sitting down, as it were. We were gathered around tables of 10 or 12 members of the Assembly, and most of those were bishops, but there were women, priests and religious and other lay people who were involved in each group. And the groups were divided into languages. And so I was in an English language group, but there were Italian groups, Spanish, Portuguese, and French. And if you didn't speak any of those languages, then you ended up in an English group. And so I think the English-speaking groups were the most diverse of all the groups, and that made for some interesting dynamics in our discussion. At the beginning, or before the Synod or the Assembly proper started, we went on a 3-day retreat to Sacrofano, which is just on the outskirts of Rome. And I thought that was a wonderful time for us to get to know each other just a little bit. Most of us, hadn't met each other. Even some of the bishops hadn't met each other. So that was a good opportunity just to meet before the real work of the Assembly started. But also we were led very, very well by Father Timothy Radcliffe in just opening ourselves up to the process and the spirituality of synodality. And that retreat was characterized by prayer and silence, which I think is quite vital to any process that we undertake to become a more synodal church, that prayer and also silence, because it's in the silence that we can listen to each other, firstly, or, obviously, but then also listen to the Spirit and to what God is calling us to and to become. So that silence is necessary. And so that set us up nicely for the actual work of the assembly. And so that the assembly proper of the synod was about a month long, and we worked from Monday to Saturday. We had a half day on Saturday, and we got a day off here and there, but generally, pretty much they were full on days, and we were constantly encouraged to listen. And when you've been listening for sort of 6-8 hours, there's only so many words you can physically take in, and so some people reach their limit, as it were, and some reach that limit before others, of course. But it was really an effort just to listen. The process that we used to discuss the various topics that were part of the work of the assembly, the methodology we used was that of a conversation in the Spirit, and many parishes and many communities have become familiar with that process. But essentially, there were 3 rounds of sharing involved in that process. The first round is we were given 4 minutes to share what it is that we want to share on a particular topic, and that was uninterrupted. So we were confident that whatever we were sharing, that we had as much of that 4 minutes as possible to really share what we needed to. And every sort of 4 or 5 speakers, we paused for silence, and that for me was quite invaluable to the process as well, because it also helped with the listening. And then we continued around the circle, so 10 or 12 of us in a group. And then the second time we shared, the second time we went around the circle, the emphasis was on what we heard other people say. So not so much repeating what I wanted to say or adding to what I wanted to say. We were really encouraged to listen and to identify what we heard, both from the other members of our little circle, but also what the Spirit might be saying to us. And then the third round was not so much in a circle, but we were encouraged to have an open conversation, a free-flowing dialogue, if you like. Again, characterized by listening, but also, being able to sort of weave a way forward. So in my sort of imagining of that process, it was very much starting off with I, so what I want to say, and then we moved to the you. What is it that I hear you saying? And then that third round was about we. What is it that we say together? And the object of that whole process was for us to come up with a report, if you like, on behalf of our group as to what we would want to say to the assembly regarding that particular topic. And in the report, we had to identify certain things. And the first one was our convergences. So what is it that we agreed on in relation to the topic? What are the things that we can find convergence on? The second one was what are our divergences? So where we couldn't quite find agreement on particular things. And, there were disagreements. We didn't agree on everything, but I always felt that in the groups that I was in, those disagreements were handled with respect and integrity. And if I was to sort of put a Maori spin on it, I would say that everybody left that conversation with their mana still intact, is what I would characterize it as. So we had to identify our divergences. Cardinal Hollerich, who was the Rapporteur General, he said to us these words. He says, we're not afraid of difference, and we're not afraid of divergence. And so we took that to heart. And identify those things that we couldn't agree on as part of what we wanted to say. The third thing we had to identify was what questions do we still have? So after the rounds of discussions and the many different experiences shared and knowledge shared, we then had to highlight, well, what is it that still needs some exploration and still needs some reflection, and we still have questions on. And then the fourth thing we were to identify in the report was what insights might we be able to give to the assembly, and therefore to the wider church, And so those 4 things were included in our report, and then every group had to feed back to the assembly. So there were about 30, 31, 32 groups maybe, and so every group had an opportunity to present their report. So that took quite a while. We had simultaneous translations in headphones, for all the different language groups, and that took some getting used to. So all up, one question or one topic took about 3 to 4 days to be able to complete that process. So it was quite a lengthy sort of effort. But through that, wonderful things were shared. One of the things that really I was surprised right from the beginning is that we were encouraged and invited to address each other by first names, so no titles. Part of the thing about the synod is that unlike previous synods where the seating was sort of auditorium style, with the bleachers going, further back, and the cardinals and the bishops were sitting according to rank. So the higher the rank, the closer you got to the Pope type of thing, and the lesser the rank, well, probably the closer you got to God, because you were sort of further back up in the bleachers. But there was none of that in this setting. We were all seated around a table, so we were all equal, if you like, looking at each other eye to eye. And we were encouraged to address each other and by our first name. So there were no titles used. Then that sometimes people fell back into the habit of saying, Your Grace, Your Eminence, and so forth and so on. But generally, people were quite good. We just became, addressing each other by name. And Pope Francis said to us, well, that's important, that when we come to discuss these things, that there's a sense of equality about it. But it was a wonderful experience. There were moments there that the discussions were robust. I heard in some media reports, both at the time and also after coming home, that bishops were walking out and synod members were in tears and they were shouting and all that sort of thing. And to be honest, I never witnessed any such thing. Even when there were disagreements, particularly in the groups that I was in, they were always done, I felt anyway, with respect and integrity. So if I can say, in terms of coming home, how do we bring that experience of the assembly? Well, it's to continue to journey together. The word synod, coming from 2 Greek words, synhodos, journeying together or on the road together. In Te Reo Māori, hikoi ngā tahi, being on a journey together, and also about listening to all the views that are necessary in order to make decisions in the church. And that's really how we are to proceed. There sometimes can be a temptation to make our synodality more structural, whereas we already have structures, and so the aim therefore should be to make those structures more synodal, more in a process in which voices are heard and people are listened to. Now, the methodology of a conversation of the Spirit is just one way of adopting a synodal way forward, but there are many other ways that we can live out this process of synodality. But rather than looking at it as a structure, it's more about a spirituality, a way of life. Synodality is a way of life, and we were reminded through the assembly that this is nothing new for the church. In actual fact, that we are reclaiming really what was the church. The early church was synodal, and there are various examples in Scripture about how the early church made decisions, that it was definitely hearing the voices of the community, but through its leaders, decisions were made. So some of those, some of that will be vital and useful for us as a country, and to be able to continue this journey together. Kia ora.
Kia ora, Manuel. Thank you. Over to you, Paul.
Good evening, everyone. And I've just been having a look at the participants, and it's great to see a number of people that I know from different parts of the country. So thanks for being here. In terms of the questions that Lucy asked at the beginning, what were the surprises from the synod? For me, the meeting with other people from all around the world was a really powerful experience, and something I hadn't really appreciated quite what that was going to mean. Manuel made reference to the fact that we began with that 3-day retreat in Sacrofano, just out of Rome, this amazing centre that could accommodate the 400 of us there with the chapel, and Timothy Radcliffe was his input was really powerful and really set the scene. But part of what was really good about it was that we actually ate together at the Synod itself. Because we were in language groups, it meant we didn't tend to mix quite as much with the other language groups as we did with our own English group. Whereas at the retreat at the beginning, you'd end up sitting at a table and find that half of them spoke Spanish and there were German, all sorts of mix of people. And that was a really nice way of getting to know other people before we began, as well as to put it in the context of prayer. So I found that really a powerful experience, which then was carried on throughout the Synod and the conversations in the Spirit and the amount of prayer and reflection that we did. As Manuel said, every 5 or 6 speaker, we would stop and we would pray for 3 minutes, and 3 minutes would come up on the screen and count down, and away we'd go again. And that happened all the time, all the way through, which was really powerful as a way of calling the Spirit into all of the conversation, so that it didn't end up being political, or someone could say something really provocative or not, and then in a few minutes you're there, you have time to pray and process around that. And that was, I found that really helpful. And in terms of a surprise, because we've done conversations in the Spirit here, I thought we did them well, and it was obvious that quite a number of people at the Synod hadn't really followed through in that process, and so they were new to it, whereas I think in New Zealand we had been faithful to that, and so the experience of seeing that at work was really powerful. The other surprise, I think, for me was the experience of the diversity of the church, that we are, as a church, we're so many nations and ways of thinking and culture, and it's so diverse, and we live in the bottom of the world in our part, which tend to we think in a very Western way. Other parts of the world don't think that way at all, and you're exposed to that and all its best and more difficult parts as part of the Synod process, and I found that really I don't know if I'd say it was enlightening, but a real experience of how do you deal with that sort of diversity. In terms of challenges, it was very demanding in terms of listening. You could spend a whole day listening to people, and that's very tiring, and trying to hear what they're saying and not switch off or be distracted is not easy. And sometimes it was frustrating, especially one of the disappointments, I think, for me around the process and what we did was we'd go through the process on our table as Manuel outlined, and then we'd have a general discussion in which anyone could speak for up to 3 minutes on the topic that was being discussed. But often what was said was not linked to what was being discussed. It was either someone getting up who'd prepared something before and wanted to get it out there, which I think was a hangover from previous synods, rather than responding or adding to what had been discussed already. And that the people who were facilitating kept reminding us, saying, look, only speak if you've got something to add or another dimension. That wasn't always so good. So that made those big sessions where we were having to listen difficult. What did I learn about synodality? I think that the importance in the process of what it is to listen, to be able to sit there, to listen, to just let things soak in, not have to answer everything straight away. That was one of the way it was structured, especially in the conversation in the spirits. It didn't get up being in terms of one person saying something, someone says something else, they get the right reply. That wasn't possible in the process. So that changed the dynamic, and whether they use the same system again in the next session of conversations in the spirit will be interesting to see. Some people found that very frustrating, that someone could say something and then you didn't have a chance to respond because in the big group, because you had to book your time, and if you'd already spoken earlier, you didn't get on till everyone else had. So that was part of that. And also the ability to work together. We had to work quite hard together as a group to come up with a 2-page synopsis around our questions, to listen, to modify. And I think that for me, that's a good experience of what it is if we're really trying to work together to look at a problem or an issue or what we might do. And that I found that really helpful. One of the things for me that kept is that this was part one of a 2-part process. And so people have said, are we going to do everything that's come out? What are we going to do into the future from what's come out so far? For me, part of it is allowing the second part of the synod to happen, to then see the whole picture of or what's emerged after one session and then the second session. I also think one of my experiences of it all would be that I think when you see the church in New Zealand compared to the church in other parts of the world, I think we're relatively we're pretty flexible. The relationship between people is not as nowhere near as hierarchical, I suspect, as it is in other places, and hearing other people speak. And we do have a church that is trying to listen. People don't always feel that, but I think we do, and the synod experience highlighted that for me when you hear other people talk about how it is for them. And so it did give me some confidence around the Church in New Zealand and how we're trying to do and to be, and very trying and secular circumstances, which is very much the experience of the West, but it's not the experience of other parts of the church. So I think those were the things. The experience of the synod, how did it change me? I don't think I came back changed, but I did come back with a sense of the broadness of being aware that there are all sorts of ways of looking at things, and that my own Western bias is something I have to be conscious of, and to be able to stop and listen rather than just talking. And having said that, I'll stop talking. Thanks.
Thank you, Paul. Okay, time for some questions now, and we did have some come in already. One question is, I would love to hear about the role and place of Indigenous peoples and the acculturation of the faith. Perhaps, Manuel, I can ask you to address this one.
Yeah, I mean, this particular topic is the one that I had made several interventions on. So the way that the Synod operates is that you have your group discussions, and then, as Paul said, you listen to other people's or other groups' report back, and then you are able to make individual interventions. And so the interventions that I made were largely around the role of Indigenous people and the engagement of Indigenous people with the church, and the church to Indigenous people. So and I was quite what's the word? Not pleased. Pleased isn't the word, but I mean I was pleased, but I was quite encouraged, if I can say that there is a section of the final synthesis report that is devoted to Indigenous people, and can I say that one of the interventions that I made is actually word for word in the actual synthesis document. So that sort of just highlights, I think, in some way that the Synod members really did take seriously the Church's commitment to engaging with Indigenous peoples wherever they might be in the world, and how the richness of culture has something to give to the Church.
Thank you. Another question. Can synodality help bridge the gap between the local parish and the global church? Dennis, I think maybe this one is for you. Can the synodality help bridge the gap between the local parish and the global church?
Is it me? Yes, I would say that the synodality can connect the parish into the global church, When I look at mission is actually not achieved by the up there. It always starts in the ground, so to say. And this is my view. It doesn't necessarily speak to everyone. So the mission starts in the ground, and it's in the parishes. And as we encourage or inspire or enable parishes to carry out that mission, then it could reflect into the whole global picture, so to say. And so synodality, if it's encouraged or done in the parish level, it could grow up even into the hierarchy, I would say.
Thank you. So starting from the ground up. There was a comment from a group of spiritual directors saying, Synod information has caused our group to ponder as to how the Synod process may affect our roles as members of the Church and Ignatian spiritual directors. Also, what we may be called to offer our Church communities. I suppose this is in terms of also the conversation in the spirit that is being encouraged as the process to be used. Paul, would you like to respond?
Yeah, I think I do think the ability to be able to discern and to pray and to understand where the Holy Spirit is working, if that's going to be the way that we operate within a synodal church, then I think there is a real place for, I mean, there always has been, but even more so in helping people to grasp and to experience what that looks and feels like, how that then shapes what we do. So I'd say, I mean, spiritual direction for people is a very significant need in the church now, even before we're thinking of being synodal. So I think because sometimes I think one of the difficulties we have is that we use the word synodal, and I think people have all sorts of understandings of or thoughts about what they think it is. And if we asked 20 people what does it mean to be synodal, I suspect we get 20 different answers. And so part of the into the future, I think, will be having a clear, this is what it means to be synodal, and this is what it looks like, and these are the gifts and skills that we'll need in order to be that way. Because sometimes it's thought that synodal means democratic, and I'm not sure that's quite. I am sure it's not quite the way it is. There is listening is different than getting what I think should happen. So yeah, no, I think for people who are in spiritual direction ministry and growing that ministry, and a number of people who can provide that would be really important if we're really going to become a church where we're listening in the spirit.
Thank you. A question came through asking why there was no woman representing New Zealand at the Synod. So there were names of women put forward, but keep in mind that the three people who went from New Zealand were actually part of the Oceania team. And in the Oceania team, there were a good number of women. So although we were not represented by someone from New Zealand as such, we were represented. And also keep in mind that this year, or this Synod, 54 women were present at the Synod with voting rights, and that is 54 more women than the last Synod. So we have good reason to rejoice.
Can I add something?
Yeah.
Go, Dennis.
Okay. Actually, we're fortunate or blessed in a way that there are three from New Zealand. There are so many countries who didn't have even one. Yeah, so in a small country like ours, having three is such a blessing.
And can I just also add to that too? It probably just to provide a bit of clarity around the membership of the assembly. So Archbishop Paul was elected from the New Zealand Bishops' Conference. So in one word, representative. However, Dennis and I we don't actually represent Aotearoa. We just happen to be members who are chosen to be at the assembly who come from Aotearoa. So there's a sort of a subtle but I think important distinction to make, that we actually didn't go there representing New Zealand. We went there specifically as people that have been chosen by the Holy Father, and it just so happened that we're from New Zealand, Aotearoa.
Thank you. There's a question from a teenager. As a teen, I'm interested in knowing how a synodal church can help young people, especially teens, feeling encouraged to connect more with their faith and their church. Dennis, as the youngest of the three.
Yeah, I would also like to answer the question that let's start with the teen. Every place, every person, every member of the church has a place in the church, and so that the teens should have a place in there. And we not forget that they are not there to prepare for as the next generation, but they are part of the church already, and they should have a role to play in there. That's why it has to be, I would say that the Synod has actually talked about the youth as well, that they have a place in the church, and the church should find a way to not just bring them in, but to go where they are. And I think there was many discussions during the Synod about where they are, how can we get there, so to say, and engage with them in their level in the world, so to say. And one of that is the digital missionaries that can be helpful to reach out to them. And so they have plenty of roles to play actually in the parish. In my previous parish, definitely we tried to do our best to have them in the church. And yes, what a vibrant church would it be if the youth are there as well, knowing that they can do something to serve the church and they can participate in the mission of the church. It's a matter of finding ways to include them in the process.
Thank you. And thank you to the teenager who's joined us tonight. There's another question for you, Dennis, specifically. Can you share why it is important to you to conform to the dress code next time?
Yes, actually, yes, how do you call that? Somebody said to me that if you do as Romans do, something like that. Yeah, it may
When
not
in
be.
Rome. Yeah.
When you're in Rome,
Yeah.
do like Romans or act as like the Romans do. Yeah. So it's, I would say personally, everyone's wearing the, so to say, regalia and and it's my first time, so I didn't know what to do with it really. So I felt like I have to do something to fit in, so to say. Because I'm a clergy, the rest, the lay, they're wearing just ordinary dresses. The youth even there had a cap in his head during the whole session, and no one really bothered to correct or to check him out, so to say. And so perhaps to I belong to the group of African bishops, so to say. I lived with them, and they're always dressing up. And so, if you look around, I'm the one that's different, so to say. So I'm quite visible among the group, so to say. Yeah, and so I need to conform a bit, so to say, with the dress code there.
It's an interesting question because there wasn't anything about a dress code, and in fact, for bishops, for the first time, we didn't have to wear all our gear except on the first and last days, which was a big step. In the past, they'd wear all the gear, and so that was quite a move to say, you can wear clericals, or you didn't have to wear clericals if you didn't want to, and there were certainly some priests there, like Dennis, who didn't. But I must say, I didn't take very many clerical shirts with me either, because I thought it was going to be a little bit more casual. So, and it is, you do, yeah, it's just one of those things that you think, oh, well, actually, yeah. But it didn't. It wasn't a barrier, I don't think. But it is one of those things about when you're in Rome. Yeah.
I mean, anyone who's ever been to Rome will know that Italians in particular, they love wearing uniforms. Everyone's got a uniform. The coffee makers that were there making us this wonderful coffee in the breaks and at the assembly, they were in uniforms. The people who were hailing taxis, everyone wears uniforms. They love it.
Thank you. On to the next question. Do you think that the Synod really addressed the concerns of those who feel excluded? Example, LGBTQ communities.
I'm sorry, I sat next to James Martin because we were all sitting alphabetically. So, and he sort of was invited by the Holy Father to be there. We certainly tried to talk, we did try and talk about LGBTQ. The group that I was in was very sympathetic to it, but there were other parts of the world where it definitely isn't. And so it wasn't that it wasn't discussed, but it's one of the flashpoints for where you can see that there are very different opinions from around the world about that. And so I wouldn't say, so in fairness, it was discussed. There were a lot of people who were, including at the Synod, who were disappointed that the final document was watered down from the earlier draft, but it was also a case of whether it would get voted through, because we had to vote on every paragraph of the synthesis document at the end, and the feeling was that if it wasn't, it may get voted out, and then there'd be nothing about it. So that's the tension, and that's the reality of the process and the church and the people all the people who were there, who represent all parts of the church. So I know it was difficult, and I know that James Martin was very disappointed at the end, because we'd certainly been quite a lot of talk about. We'd talked a lot about it.
Mm.
Look, I think that was a flaw, if I was to use that word, a flaw in the process, in the sense that, for a lot of these topics, we weren't talking with these people. We were talking about, and I'm not just labeling, singling out the LGBTQ plus community. I'm saying, youth, women, Indigenous, all those other groups. There was a lot of talking about, and rather not enough talking with, which I think will happen. But it's got to be an intentional effort to do that. So I think that's a flaw, really. But practically speaking, if you were to invite that, you'd have a synod of tens of thousands of people, and so the real work, as I've always said, has to be on the shop floor, as it were, the grassroots, so that we can really talk with, and rather about.
If I can add, yes, that's why I say that it was such an experience for me, because all sides of that topic are being presented, so to say, from left to right. They are put on the table for discussion for us to hear, and there were some passionate about it, actually, from own personal experience and also from the cultural background of it. So definitely there were some discussions about it. And it's not just about that, actually. There was a funny moment. Well, for me, it's a funny moment, because one also shared about, what about those who are suffering from dementia? We should include them in the discussion as well, something like that. Yeah, so yeah, definitely those different groups had been included in the discussion.
Thank you. There are a couple of questions that are just kind of similar, asking, what are the learnings from the Synod that could be put into practice at parish level here in Aotearoa?
I'll start, because I work in the parish, and in Levin, we tried really to work to follow the synodal process, and yeah, thanks be to God, it worked in the parish. I can attest to that it worked in the parish. Yeah, and when people start to understand how these things work, it would really keep the ball rolling forward, I would say. And people are not how do you call that? They're not actually hiding away, or they're actually presenting their gifts able to be part of the church. And when we involve the church, the people in the synodal way, it's really discovering their own gifts and how they can participate in the mission of the church. There is no particular area that, oh, this is the only way we do like that, but the gifts that you can discover from each one can be used to help us further in our mission. Even if you are there in the house, you're not able to come to church anymore, but you actually can be part of that mission still. That's what I discovered in this process.
I think one of the other things for me is that parish is sort of the basic structure of which our church is organised, but there are also lots of other aspects of church life that are not just in parish, which can from whom the operating synodally is the way a way of trying to be as church. And so and until we really have a sense of people wanting to be on mission and doing that within our church, the synodal way is going to take a long time for it to just be embedded in the way that we operate and practice. And so it won't happen overnight at all, but gradually, if we keep trying to operate in this way, it will help people to feel involved, and not just at parish level, but in all parts of the life of the church.
We spoke in the assembly. We spoke about a charismatic church. That our church has, a vast range of charisms, and those charisms should be utilized, for the for the good of the church, the whole body. And I think it's also about finding a harmony. Pope Francis used the word harmony, a harmony between hierarchy and synodality, and that speaks really to the whole process of decision making and decision taking, recognizing that as a body, there needs to be people who must take the decisions, and so those are our leaders. But the process of decision making in our communities, that needs to be examined in the light of synodality, and in the light of our walking together, and in the light of listening. How can our decision making processes at all levels of the church be more synodal? Recognizing too that with the hierarchy and with our leadership in the church, those decision takers, but really just finding a harmony between the hierarchical nature of the church and also the synodal nature of the church.
Thank you. Another question: what concrete outcomes, if any, do you expect to eventuate after the 2024 assembly? How might it change the church, do you feel? A hard one to answer, maybe.
I think if you look at the synthesis document, you'll see that under each of the topics, there were matters for consideration and then proposals. And I think that gives an idea of what was discussed and what was being put forward as possibilities in the first stage. And what I'm interested in is when we return for the second phase, to see what has come out of the feedback and discernment around that synthesis document in light of what those are. And so I think if you want to get a sense of, well, where was this synod, what was it thinking about, and look at the considerations and proposals for each section, because and I don't know what's going to come out in the end after the second session, and whether that's actually just part of something bigger again, because what happens is that document goes to the Holy Father, who then does with it as he chooses. So I'm really conscious this is a process, and so I'm not trying to second guess where it's going to end up myself.
I also, and this is in speaking with other members of the assembly in Rome, that there is a sense that there's no going back type of thing. That the Holy Father has started us on a journey, which is going to be a journey of many years. So, and I don't think that the second session of the Synod is necessarily, we need to see it necessarily as an end. Really to the process. It's really just another step in the process that we're on. And as Paul said, it's a process that's going to unfold and evolve over many years. But I personally also have the sense that there's no going back, and that a church of the 21st century must hold these elements of synodality in order to go forward. This is in so many other parts of our lives, and we're seeing not so much synodality, but we're seeing the process of decision making and inclusion and diversity. All of those sort of elements are really coming to the fore in many other parts of daily life, and the church isn't going to be excluded from that or exempt from that reality.
If I can add, I think the new era is dawning upon us, I would say, and I can see that a new image of a church is it's forming, so to say, and for me, it's quite exciting, full of hope, so to say, and yeah, it's just very, very, how do you call it? Not just exciting, but I can't wait for it to happen, so to say.
Thank you. Thank you. Unfortunately, we're running out of time. I'm aware that we haven't answered all the questions, but I hope that you enjoyed the sharing. Thank you, Paul, Dennis, and Manuel, for sharing all those experiences and learnings tonight. Perhaps we can just end with a prayer. We pray together. We thank you, loving God, for your presence with us this evening. As we depart from this space now, we ask you to bless the remainder of our day. May the sharing of this gathering continue to ruminate within us. May it bear fruit in our lives, wherever we are and whatever we do. We ask this in the name of Jesus and in the power of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Thank you all for being with us tonight. I hope you enjoyed it, and may God bless you. Thank you.